Hello and welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Media. I'm your host, Emily, and today we are going to be talking about one battle after another. It's that time of year where you're going to start hearing from me more and more about awards season movies, and this was pretty much the movie to kick us off this year. Although a few smaller contenders did come out before it, this really was the catalyst for this year's award season. So this is Paul Thomas Anderson's new movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Benicio del Toro, and Chase Infinity, as well as many others, that follows the sort of misadventures and escapades of a single father who is an ex-revolutionary trying to get his daughter back after his revolutionary past catches up with them. It's about 3 hours long. It is somewhere situated between drama and comedy. And I'm here to tell you, as I'm sure that you've heard from others, that this movie is completely excellent. One Battle After Another is one of those movies that you watch and you can kind of feel the invigoration of like classic Hollywood pretty much as soon as you get into it. It has this sort of tangible, tactile feel to it that brings to mind the best sorts of movies from like the 1980s and the 1990s, and a really heartwarming and well performed story at the center of it with Leonardo DiCaprio's relationship with his daughter. His character has a name. I don't remember it off the top of my head at this moment. But either way, I think that Leo really brings something to the table that's very funny in this movie as this sort of like woke activist, grizzled older guy who just kind of wants to smoke weed and sit around his house. And seeing him interact with this world and kind of get to play a little bit with the absurdity and levity of it is pretty great. And that is something that I also appreciate about this movie is that part of where that sort of classic feel comes in is that this movie is super, I don't know what term to use other than whimsical, but it really combines this sort of realism of revolution with a little bit of silly excess that I think really elevates the tone and vibe of the movie. And that's specifically most evident in the subplot related to Sean Penn's character, who is this sort of military general who is obsessed with Leonardo DiCaprio's character's wife, Chase Infinity's character's mother, who is this sort of super like off the rails revolutionary who just kind of does whatever she wants. And she winds up having an interaction with this guy that like sets him down this really bizarre path for the rest of the movie. And Sean Penn just brings so much weirdness to the table in this particular role in a way that's really awesome and creative and that I didn't expect.
You like black girls? I love them. I love them.
Without giving away too much of the game of the movie, because I don't really intend to spoil it, at least not yet, the organization that he winds up becoming a part of and the characters that he interacts with had me pretty much falling out of my seat laughing in the theater. So if you have liked previous Paul Thomas Anderson films, this is probably a movie you will also like because it does a lot of the same things that make those other movies great. It has that slight lackadaisical silliness that underlies a very serious plot with a lot of very human connection in a way that's just satisfying to watch. It's exciting, it's thrilling. Despite being 3 hours long, you never really feel the runtime at all. And the filmmaking on display here, as you would expect of Paul Thomas Anderson, is just total class. The movie is shot beautifully. There's so many excellent little edits and transitions. The use of music is great. All of the performances are stellar. This is pretty much a movie that was just engineered to perfection and came together just excellently, while also managing to simultaneously be very, very, very funny. I really want to emphasize how impressed I was with that aspect of this movie, because especially when it comes to award season movies or to like Oscar bait or whatever you want to call it, there's a tendency to avoid comedy because the Academy doesn't value it as much or in the same way or anything like that. And I think One Battle After Another really manages to integrate comedy and remain legitimately funny without having to give up the parts of it that are serious in a way that's really cool, and winds up delivering on some really pointed satire. I'm also surprised, and not to say disappointed, but I was surprised by how the movie handled its politics. For a movie about revolution, this movie isn't necessarily like a preacher of any sort. It doesn't necessarily feel like a movie that's like, this is about how awesome the revolution is or whatever it happens to be. In fact, some of the characters, especially Leo's, are in fact kind of ideologically disconnected from it. But where the movie does shine is in how it shows coalitions and how it centers the idea that at the heart of any movement that is trying to do good is people working with other people. It's not just ideas, it's doing what is best to materially help people. And we see that a lot in Benicio del Toro's character. We get just a lot of interaction with him that shows how his revolution, even if it's smaller, what he contributes to and what he does is very boots on the ground, very working with his community, and it's really excellent. It's very meaningful, and I really appreciated that part of it. Where the movie does get more political is in its takedown of sort of alt-right and sort of like far extremist politics on the right, as Sean Penn's character winds up getting involved in this white supremacy group who call themselves the Christmas Adventurers and say Hail St. Nick at all of their meetings, which, while obviously ridiculous, every scene with them just winds up being this totally bizarre and hilarious, like exacerbated satire of those sorts of far right groups that just had me giggling in my seat every single time they showed up. Just a total lambasting in a way that was really awesome and well put together. I also think Chase Infinity's character in this film is very excellent. This sort of daughter character who winds up getting kidnapped, but goes through her own arc of self-sufficiency. Something I really liked about this movie that I can't say of a lot of movies of its ilk is that it avoids doing the Children of Men thing by making the girl who needs to be rescued pretty much separate from the person trying to rescue her for the entirety of the film. They don't really reconnect until the very end. And what that means is that a lot of her arc has to do with self-sufficiency. It has to do with learning to fight back even when someone's not there to save her, and realizing that maybe her dad taught her some of this stuff for a reason, which is a really cool and I think creative way of doing that type of arc that still establishes a meaningful relationship between these two characters and still makes it so that their development is entwined without making it so that it is a female lead who has to rely on a male to save her. It's not that. It's something else that's playing on some of those same story beats in a new and interesting way, which I just really loved. Ultimately, I could go on for a while longer if I wanted to about why One Battle After Another works and why it works so excellently. But ultimately, it has the same thing that makes every Paul Thomas Anderson movie work, which is a heart. It has just this beautiful, beating, bleeding heart of emotion. And it's just hard to match that. It's hard to find anyone who does that like Paul Thomas Anderson. And this movie just totally works that connection to the best of its ability. In my opinion, it is by far one of the best movies that's come out this year, although it's maybe not my favorite. I think it is excellent and most certainly worth the time investment to go ahead and see it. I don't have too much to say other than my glowing recommendation before we move on to the segment of this video that I'm sure you are all waiting for after we retired it from last year. It's time to talk about where this movie is probably going for awards. So when it comes to the Oscars, there's pretty much no doubt in my mind that this is going to be nominated for Best Picture. And it will probably also win, but getting into Best Picture doesn't necessarily guarantee you a win. A lot of how the Oscars work has to do with getting into these other categories, and I do think that this movie probably has a pretty good shot at getting into a few of them. Immediately, my mind goes to directing. I think Paul Thomas Anderson just hit such a home run with this movie that I would be shocked to see him not nominated for directing, which is a little bit sad after last year when we had so many new directors. It does look like this year's directing lineup might be a little bit more of an old guard, but that's okay. Ultimately, I do think PTA will show up in that category. I also wouldn't be super surprised to see this nominated for original screenplay, but that's a slightly more competitive category this year, so we'll have to see. In terms of non-Paul Thomas Anderson himself categories, I could certainly see Leonardo DiCaprio for lead actor. Chase Infinity for Best Lead Actress is certainly a possibility. That's what they're pushing her for. And while we do have some pretty heavy rumblings in movies like Sentimental Value and The Testament of Anne Lee with like Amanda Seyfried and Renate Reinsve, I do think Chase Infinity has a pretty good chance of getting nominated. Where I see this movie cleaning up with certainty is in the supporting acting category, where I could see both Sean Penn and Benicio del Toro potentially being nominated. Although that's obviously not set in stone. If it was one of the two of them, I think it is much more likely to be Sean Penn, which I have no problem with. Sean Penn's pretty excellent in this movie. I think he's hilarious, and he would certainly be deserving of the nomination if he got it.
Why is your shirt so tight?
I'm not gay, if that's what you're saying.
I didn't say that.
I'm not a homosexual.
Beyond that, I think this movie probably stands a chance in some technical categories, but it has a couple of heavy hitters to contend with that I think might make it an uphill battle. For example, I could see like a cinematography nomination, I could see a production design nomination, but I think with movies like Frankenstein, Wicked, Avatar, Sinners, all of these sort of blockbusters that are swinging heavily in the technical categories, I think One Battle After Another is just going to have a hard time keeping up. So I think in terms of its road to success, it's really banking on getting those key nominations for things like editing, for things like screenplay and directing, and cashing in on all of those acting nominations. I think if they can manage to achieve that, then there is a really strong possibility that One Battle After Another has a pretty clear path to Best Picture. But I'm not quite as certain as I at one point was, partially because there is another movie that's essentially trying to carve that same path in the form of Hamnet. Although Hamnet also has a lot more production design and technical stuff going on, which may give it a pretty clear path as well. So ultimately, it's hard to say with any certainty how One Battle After Another is going to do, especially so early in awards season. But it is certainly going to be one of the heaviest hitters in terms of contention. I think any person who's trying to get a sense of how award season is going to look this year, you would be a fool to overlook this movie. It's probably going to be one of the key players, and probably going to be one of the most competitive in the race. So certainly check it out if you're interested following the award season this fall into winter. But I don't have too much more to say about One Battle After Another. It's an excellent movie. It's well worth your time. And it really delivers on everything that the premise and the director and the cast could have brought to the table. I can't think of a movie that I walked out of feeling more satisfied this year. It does pretty much everything you'd want it to do, and it's really hard to compete with that, especially wrapped up in a funny, exciting, and heartfelt package. So I would certainly recommend carving out the requisite 3 hours of your time to watch One Battle After Another. Even if you aren't a person who normally likes long movies, I promise you this movie does not drag or does not feel slowly paced in the same way that a movie like The Brutalist does. This movie keeps up the adrenaline, it keeps up the excitement. So even if you aren't normally a fan of this type of movie, I would recommend sitting down and giving it a chance. Thank you so much for watching today's video. And if you want to continue following award season here with us on Million Dollar Media, go ahead and click that subscribe button and ring that little notification bell. Also, if you want to give Max money, although not me money, obviously, you can subscribe to our Patreon. Beyond that, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all in the next video.